Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us today. What an exciting time for healthcare and medicine with all the latest in AI. So just to start, before introductions, just wanted to get a show of hands. Who's been using the latest gen AI models to diagnose themselves, find out what's going on? Yeah, that lower than I thought. Anything that's wrong, I'm on there, with the symptoms. Interesting. Okay, so we're going to be talking about that, but health and medicine and AI is a lot broader than that. So we have a great panel today to talk about the different components of health, medicine, and AI. So we've got Abe Stern, who's a product manager of NVIDIA, Bharath Ramsundar, who's the CEO of Deep Forest Sciences, and we've got Alaa Youssef, who's a postdoc researcher at Stanford. I'm going to ask them each to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into one overarching question. And then we had a few questions on the app, but also I'd like to open it up to the floor. There is a mic there, so if you have a question, please line up. We do want to make this as interactive as possible. I'll start briefly. Myself, I'm a partner at Pivotal Life Sciences. We're a life sciences investment fund, and I'm also the head of our AI team. So we build we're building an AI platform to give investors decision support on the investments they're making in drug discovery companies. Previous to that, I was at 23andMe and other biotechs before that. So I'm going to move it over to Abe to start us off with the panelists' introductions.
Sure. Thanks for the invitation, and great to be here. Abe Stern, I'm product manager for BioNeMo. So we're building software and technologies to accelerate drug discovery. And I think you kind of seeded the question a little bit, which is what are some of the things that we're most excited about? And I think to kind of lead that off for me, there are a couple of specific technologies that I think are really exciting, and a couple of broader kind of paradigms that are going forward, I think, going to be really, really exciting. I think in the near term, some of the near-term technologies that I'm really optimistic about are generative models for de novo design. And I think what we're seeing is that this general class of problems, drug discovery is really well suited for solving that general class of problem, right? Where, one of the basic questions, at least in a couple of modalities, right? When you're developing a small molecule drug or you're developing a monoclonal antibody, the question is, given this protein, what is a small molecule that can effectively bind and therefore have some inhibitory or therapeutic effect to that protein, and also have this incredibly broad set of characteristics that make a drug successful, things that are related to its toxicity and what tissues it gets and how it's metabolized and so on and so forth. So generative models are, I think, really well suited for that kind of problem, for these kind of multi-parameter optimization problems. And that applies in kind of two of the most important areas that I just mentioned, kind of small molecule drugs and developing therapeutic proteins, right, where it's a similar kind of problem. The longer term, I think, shift that I'm similarly excited about, that I think you're starting to see taking place, in fact, in a lot of what Bharath is doing, is this coming together of physics and physics-informed methods and AI, right? So I think we're finally getting to the point, maybe not finally, but we're seeing increasingly that these aren't independent AI models, right? An AI model trained for a specific task does its thing, and it's served its purpose as an individual AI model, but rather starting to leverage a lot of what in computational chemistry has been done for many years, right? So there's been a track record of using physics and simulation to answer some of these questions that are related to exactly the areas that I just mentioned. And what I think we're starting to see now is the intersection of these methods, right? Where AI is working together with physics and simulations in a variety of ways, right? So there's not just a simple one right way to do it, but there are kind of many ways that physics is coming together with AI. And yeah, that's just a general paradigm that I'm super excited about to see over the next years and maybe decades.
Yeah, over to you.
So first, pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to kind of share a little bit about some of the things we work on. So I'm the founder of Deep Forest Sciences. We're a company building a platform to accelerate the use of AI and physical methods in drug discovery. So I think one of the things that we really lean into is that if you look at LLMs, they do hallucinate a lot. They don't really understand the world. And by using knowledge of physics, chemistry, and baking that in and integrating it with the AI systems, I think you can get some results that are really exciting. To give you a quick example, an LLM, for example, is great at pulling things out of the scientific literature. Like if you query it about particular molecules or reactions or proteins, it can do that for you. What it can also do is make up for you a protein that doesn't exist because you ask it really nicely. So what we do is we build systems around the AI that control it and make sure it's giving you things that actually can exist in reality. And by having this virtuous feedback loop between simulation, classical computational chemistry, physics, biology, along with powerful new AI methods, I think you can get the best of both worlds, and that's something we're really excited by, and that's something we build tools to enable our customers to be able to leverage.
Great, thank you. Alaa?
So yeah, echoing everyone, pleasure to be here. So I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Stanford School of Medicine, and I lead the educational portfolio across the School of Medicine and AI education, so training the workforce to be prepared for using AI in hospital and for high schoolers as well. And then my main research falls under clinical safety and AI regulation and ethics. So under that falls evaluating LLMs and clinical AI models or AI-ready solutions that are coming into the clinical pipeline for patient care. And if they are vetted to be safe, then they become part of the workflow and become integrated, and we develop a monitoring plan. The second component is looking at the regulatory landscape and identifying where are the regulatory gaps and working with faculty to inform policy making.
Thanks, Alaa. So you can see that there's a broad range of things that falls under healthcare, medicine, and AI, from drug development, drug discovery, to more healthcare-related applications, like interacting with a doctor, but also the diagnostic side, where there's a lot of imaging and other types of methods where, across a broad range of disorders, you can get diagnosed. AI has a lot of applications there. Also on the clinical trial side, when you're trying to take a drug and test it, even hospital administration, insurance. So there's no shortage of applications in this space. We've got a great panel. There's focus on the chemistry and the drug discovery part from Abe and Bharath, and then Alaa's got a lot of the regulatory and more of the healthcare side of things. So I wanted to turn this back to the panel before opening it up to the audience for questions. Any other challenges or opportunities you all want to call out in the space you're working in that you feel that are important for the audience to hear about? Alaa, do you want to start?
Yeah, I can get started. So I think relevant to what we have been talking about in the past 2 days, multimodals is going to be big in healthcare. They're superseding anything we have seen, and that's because healthcare by nature is not a single type of data. It includes genes, genomics, includes medical imaging, and include text, and we are seeing the power of these models already coming in. I also want to hint to a low-hanging fruit, which is the use of generative AI to improve clinical enterprise and workflow. So hospital administration, health system has consistently been falling behind on meeting their financial targets and as well as improving care delivery. And LLMs really provide that opportunity to kind of like automate some of those tedious tasks and help streamline workflow. And I would say that the second one that's really important is the drug discovery, because it's reducing the amount of time that's needed to develop drugs, as well as identify drugs for rare diseases.
Great, thank you. Abe or Bharath, yeah?
So I think there's a lot of potential for what I'd say is physically grounded AI, making sure that AI systems actually interact in a way that is grounded by the laws of nature. And I think the laws of nature provide, effectively an infinite source of training data. It's how babies learn. You do things, can it happen in reality? If not, you get that feedback signal. And I think that if you can figure out how to take that feedback loop from reality, maybe by the laws of physics, maybe by simulation, maybe by robots, and you can feed that back into the AI system, then I think you really have that breakthrough where you enable scientific applications to really flourish, and something I'm looking forward to seeing growing over the next few years.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love the physical grounding of AI systems. I think this answer coming from maybe more of a technology platform perspective with respect to challenges going forward. And I think there are echoes of this happening in other areas, right? Like this agentic type systems is a pattern that I think is common, and we're also seeing in drug discovery. And specifically, it's where you have multiple AI systems acting together, right? And there are a couple of really interesting cases where I think we're already seeing this with drug discovery models beyond the LLMs, right? So we have a particular model called MolMIM. It's a generative model, and it does controlled generation that is steered by oracle functions. So these other oracle functions are in the inference loop. They can be other physical simulation methods. They can be other types of calculations, lighter weight calculations, or importantly, and to the point here, is that they can be other AI models, right? So acting together in concert. And the way that we're addressing this, so the broader trend, I think the broader challenge is how do you build such systems where, those of us who have worked with AI models realize how tremendously complicated the software stacks and the hardware stacks and the infrastructure is for deploying even just one of these large, for example, one of these large language models. So when we start to talk about the types of systems that we need to build where it's actually multiple AI systems working together is, I think, a challenge. And so a microservices type approach is something that we believe is probably the right form factor for this. So at NVIDIA, we're developing an architecture that we call NIMS, or NVIDIA Inference Microservices. And it's a service-oriented architecture for deploying these types of systems where you have multiple, not just one, but multiple AI systems working together in one cohesive manner.
Abe, let me follow up on that. So what are the different parts of these systems typically to sort of use these microservices? What does a stack look like if let's say you're a company wanting to do drug discovery? What would that look like if someone came to NVIDIA and said, hey, we want to build a system? What would that look like?
Sure, yeah. I think, we're probably intimately familiar with the immediate uppermost layers of the software stack, right? We're training models in frameworks. Maybe it's PyTorch, maybe it's DeepChem, and there are layers below that. Very quickly, you're going to get to NVIDIA libraries like cuDNN. So the software stacks and the communication libraries that are just underneath the surface are already getting complicated. But to keep going down, Fundamentally, this is what we're building are containers, right? And the containers contained optimized inference run times for the model, so they're accelerated. And we wrap those containers in an industry standard API, so you can easily perform inference or do other operations like customize the models through an API. And then typically, that's running on a Kubernetes stack, right? We make that easy through, actually, I almost said a piece of software that's not quite, actually it is public. It's called, we're making that deployment layer easy with something that we call NIM operator. So that's a lightweight layer to deploy NIM containers on Kubernetes. And then we stitch those together, we stitch those microservices together, and we're now publishing blueprints for doing so that we call NVIDIA agent blueprints. So these are a collection of NVIDIA inference microservices deployed in an AI, in a system, and we produce reference implementations of those that we call NIM agent blueprints.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's turn it to the audience, and we do have some questions that came through the application as well. If you want to ask a question, there's mics there, so please line up at the mic. And we have our, yes, please go ahead.
All right. As an AI healthcare startup founder, I'm a new technology that basically merges artificial intelligence and natural intelligence, as in bringing together silicon and biochemistry together. What do you guys see in the future bringing us founders such technology to open up new doors and possibilities in the future of AI and healthcare coming together? And how, as startup founders, as well as investors, help you accomplish that?
Does anyone want to take that one? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I can take maybe a first stab at it. I think one of the big challenges with applying AI in biochemical applications or other scientific applications is that for scientists at the end of the day, you need to produce something that they understand. It has to be a molecule, a protein, and it has to be experimentally vetted in the lab. So there's still a big gap right now where the AI can come up with all sorts of designs for cool things, but until it exists in reality, there's still going to be a gap where the scientific community is going to at times hesitate and not take it seriously. So finding ways to close that gap, I think, could be an amazing way for kind of startups to have an amazing impact. I know some folks working on things like robotic platforms, or you can begin to take, say, a protein design, and then get an actual protein synthesized and able to work with it. Doing the same for small molecule synthesis, that's been a 50-year open challenge, like the automated chemistry machine. That would be a Nobel Prize if anyone can really cook one up. But finding ways to close the gap between AI and the real world, I think, could be amazingly impactful for startups to work on in general.
Thank you. Next question. Does anyone else want to answer that one? Let's go to the next question, because we've got a few on this as well.
Hello. Thank you all for coming here. I'm sure you're all very busy. It's a sort of a two-part question. You guys talk about all these great solutions that AI can bring to the healthcare system, or not the system, but like healthcare in general. My question is sort of, how do you bring trust towards the people? Because the moderator here asked, before we really began, how many of you guys have used ChatGPT or some sort of AI to self-diagnose yourself? And very few people lifted their arm. So my question is, as we move down the line and models get better and things like that, how do we sort of get to that point where we can trust AI? Because, for example, automated vehicles, like driving themselves, like Waymo, Tesla full self-driving, things like that, they're statistically safer than regular human drivers, but yet there's a ton of controversy around them, regulation, anytime it makes a small mistake, it gets in the news. So, so as a result, a lot of people don't trust it, even though it's statistically safer. So my question is, how does healthcare not fall into the same issue, where even though we might have a model that's very good and very useful and helpful to people, but as soon as your doctor's like, hey, we're using this for your health outcome, they're like, well, hey, I don't like AI, it's scary, I don't understand it. How do you think we should go about that? And the second part to that question is, should we even do that? Because a doctor, commits malpractice, we could, send them to a courtroom, strip them of their medical license, for example. But we can't do that for ChatGPT. We can't send them to a courtroom and, try out for whatever mispractice they get involved in. So that's also a second part of it. Should we, deeply ingrain it as much as, some people think we should?
Thank you. Alaa, do you want to take it?
So first of all, even if you ask ChatGPT, please don't put names or or personal information in. You can ask the clinical question, but if you're not using an API, so there's some data leakage risks. So to address your point, nothing gets deployed in healthcare before going through multiple evidence-based kind of experimentation. So we do evaluate the model that comes from the vendor. We have an API channel where we get to test the model with our data, and then we do a silent deployment, and we check with our clinicians if this is useful and helpful and meaning to the patient or not. And we also assess the ethical issues around would it be advantageous to some patients but not others. And all of this ties into the governance and health system decision making of whether we should deploy this at scale or not. Most hospitals have obtained tools like ChatGPT, and they have their own API access so that clinicians can use it, but it is being used as a reference and not as a decision-making tool. And it's important for your second question is, these like ChatGPT and all of these kind of software tools, on their terms of agreement, they say that you should not be using this for medical advice, and that takes off the liability of them. And so it's a question becomes, are these products certified for you to get medical advice? Sure, some of the answers can be correct, but you take that liability. Should industries be responsible for those components is something that's regulatory have have conversations around it. But if they have in their terms of agreement that you should not be using for medical reasons, then they have kind of clarified that it's not intended for so. So I think that's the part where it is tricky, and that's why we need more patient and public education around what are your rights and what are your risks in terms of using these type of tools for clinical decision making.